Rejected Omega inherited a poor mountain house. The Alpha King discovered secrets within. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Sadie Bennett had always known she was different. Living in the heart of the Northern Pack, where strength and power defined one's value, Sadie was constantly reminded that she did not fit the mold. A weak Omega, rejected by her own pack, she had no place in a world that cherished dominance above all else. But when her grandmother passed away, Sadie was left with something that, for the first time in her life, felt like a gift: a small, forgotten house in the mountains. The house, located far from the bustling pack lands, was nothing more than a dilapidated structure, its wooden walls cracked and weathered by years of harsh winters. It was isolated, and it was hers. The pack had no use for it, so they let her have it, as though it were a mere afterthought. But to Sadie, it felt like freedom. She didn't have to prove herself here. She didn't have to be the powerful Omega everyone expected her to be. It was a place to escape the harsh judgment of others, a place to find peace, and, perhaps, to discover who she truly was. The journey to the house had been long and exhausting, the narrow mountain paths winding steeply through the forest. When she finally arrived, she was greeted by the sound of the wind howling through the trees and the sight of the house standing alone, perched atop the mountain like a forgotten relic. Despite its shabby appearance, the house had an undeniable charm. The small windows, although cracked, allowed the sunlight to spill in, and the fireplace, though cold and unused for years, seemed to invite her to rekindle its warmth. Sadie took a deep breath, her heart filled with a strange sense of belonging, even in the midst of the isolation. The first few days were spent cleaning and sorting through the remnants of her grandmother's belongings. There was nothing of great value, just old furniture, faded curtains, and a collection of books on the shelves. But one item caught her eye: a small, intricately carved box hidden in a corner of the attic. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, and inside, she found a strange, glowing stone. The stone seemed to hum with an energy that was both foreign and familiar, as though it held a power she couldn't yet understand. Little did she know, the stone was linked to a forgotten legacy, one that would soon draw the attention of someone far more powerful than she could ever imagine. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting a golden glow across the valley, Sadie couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. A sense of unease settled over her, but she shrugged it off, thinking it was simply the loneliness of the mountains. However, what she didn't know was that she was not as alone as she thought. Far below, in the depths of the forest, Alpha King Ethan Westbrook had been watching from the shadows. His sharp, silver-gray eyes had been drawn to the mountain house, sensing the presence of something, or someone, special. Ethan had come to the mountains to escape the burdens of his title, to find some peace away from the politics and power struggles of his kingdom. But what he hadn't expected was to find Sadie Bennett, a woman whose scent alone told him she was no ordinary Omega. He had been intrigued from the moment he saw her, and now, with the discovery of the stone, he knew his path was destined to cross hers. Little did Sadie know, the Alpha King's arrival was not just a coincidence. There were secrets hidden in that small mountain house, secrets that could change everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the world. The days passed slowly as Sadie settled into her new life on the mountain. Each morning, she woke to the sound of birds calling through the mist, and each evening, the sun dipped behind the peaks, casting a warm orange glow over the valley below. Despite the quiet beauty of her surroundings, a sense of restlessness lingered in her heart. It was a strange feeling, one that had nothing to do with her isolation. It was as though something, or someone, was pulling at her from the shadows. One morning, as Sadie stepped outside to gather some herbs from the overgrown garden, she felt it again. That strange pull, deep within her chest. She glanced around, her heart racing slightly, but there was nothing to see. The house stood alone, just as it had when she first arrived. Yet, somehow, it felt different now, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. As Sadie knelt to pick some wild thyme, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye, a figure, dark and imposing, moving through the trees at the edge of the property. Her breath caught in her throat, and her pulse quickened. Who could it be? She had seen no one for days, and this part of the mountain was far from any town. Before she could react, the figure stepped into the clearing, revealing itself to be a man. His dark cloak billowed in the wind, and his silver-gray eyes locked onto hers. Sadie froze, unable to move. It was him, the Alpha King, Ethan Westbrook. Her heart hammered in her chest as the reality of the situation settled in. The man who had been watching her from the shadows, the man who had somehow known she was here, was now standing before her. He was taller than anyone she had ever met, his broad shoulders making him appear even more formidable. His eyes, though, were what struck her the most. They were not the cold, calculating eyes of a ruler, but something else, something raw, searching, and full of hidden pain. Ethan took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Sadie Bennett," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I've been looking for you." Sadie's mind raced. What did he mean by looking for her? Why would the Alpha King be searching for someone like her, a rejected Omega, living alone in the mountains? Her voice caught in her throat as she managed to speak. What do you want with me?" The Alpha King's expression softened slightly, though his presence was still overpowering. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I feel drawn to you, to this place. There's something here, something that ties us together. I need to understand what it is." Sadie's confusion deepened, but there was something in his words, something in the way he spoke, that made her believe him. She had never felt this way before, not with anyone. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. "There's nothing special about me. I'm just a broken Omega. I have nothing to offer." Ethan stepped closer, his intense gaze never leaving her face. "That's where you're wrong," he said softly. "You have everything to offer. You just don't know it yet." Sadie's heart raced as he reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was gentle, but it sent a jolt of electricity through her body, making her feel things she couldn't explain. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away, and all that mattered was the connection between them. Ethan pulled his hand back, though, as if realizing the intensity of the moment. "I didn't come here to cause you trouble," he said, his voice gruff now. "But I need to know more about this place, about what you found here. There's something ancient tied to your family, something powerful." Sadie frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "This house, it's just an old, run-down shack. There's nothing here but memories of my grandmother." Ethan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing through them. "I don't believe that for a second," he muttered. "There's more here than you realize." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but Sadie didn't know what to make of them. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Because," he said finally, "I believe we're connected, in ways neither of us understand. And I'm going to stay here until I figure it out." Sadie swallowed hard. "You can't stay here. This is my home. I didn't ask for this connection." Ethan gave her a knowing look. "You might not have asked for it, but fate has brought us together. And I won't leave until I know what that means for both of us." Sadie stared at him, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. She wanted to be angry, to tell him to leave, but something deep inside her kept her rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the pull she had felt earlier, or maybe it was the undeniable truth in his words. Whatever it was, Sadie knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change forever. The next few days were a blur for Sadie. She had spent most of her time trying to avoid Ethan, but his presence lingered in the back of her mind. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was always close, watching her from afar. He had taken up residence in the small cabin next to hers, claiming that he needed time to study the mysterious connection between them, though Sadie couldn't understand why he couldn't do that from a distance. Every time they crossed paths, a strange tension hung in the air, as though something was about to snap. Sadie couldn't deny that she was drawn to him. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her heart race whenever their eyes met. She had spent years trying to convince herself that she wasn't worthy of affection, that she was broken beyond repair. But when Ethan looked at her, she felt as though he saw through the walls she had built around herself. It terrified her. One morning, as Sadie was preparing breakfast, Ethan knocked on her door. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, expecting to see him standing there with that knowing look in his eyes. "Sadie," Ethan said, his voice soft but firm, "I need your help with something." She frowned, stepping aside to let him in. "What is it this time?" she asked, trying to keep the irritation out of her voice. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room, his gaze lingering on the small fire burning in the hearth. "I've been studying the stone you found," he said finally. "There's something powerful about it, something that ties it to your family." Sadie crossed her arms, her heart beating a little faster at the mention of the stone. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan walked over to the small table where the stone rested, the soft glow of its surface casting a faint light across the room. "I believe this stone is more than just a trinket," he said, his voice low with intensity. "It's a key, Sadie. A key to something much larger than either of us." Sadie felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the stone. She had always felt a strange connection to it, but she had never imagined it could be more than just an old family heirloom. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. "There's magic tied to your bloodline," he said. "And that stone, it's a part of it. It's calling to me, to both of us. We need to understand its power, and we need to do it together." Sadie's mind raced as she tried to process his words. Magic? Her bloodline? She had always thought of herself as nothing more than an ordinary Omega, someone cast aside by the pack, unworthy of any special attention. Yet here she was, standing in a cabin with the Alpha King, who was telling her that she was connected to something far beyond her understanding. "Why me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Because you're the one the stone has chosen," he said softly. "It's always been you, Sadie. And now, we have to unlock its secrets before it's too late." Sadie swallowed hard, her throat tight with fear and uncertainty. She didn't know what was happening, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. Ethan's words echoed in her mind as she looked at the stone, the weight of their meaning settling heavily in her chest. The stone wasn't just a relic. It was a symbol of something larger, something tied to her destiny. And now, with Ethan at her side, she was about to discover what that meant. As she looked up at him, Sadie realized that she couldn't walk away from this. No matter how much she feared it, no matter how unprepared she felt, there was something inside her that was calling out for this journey. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she had always believed. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and wonder. Sadie had spent hours with Ethan, studying the stone and trying to understand the magic that seemed to be tied to her family's legacy. Ethan, always calm and composed, seemed to know more than he was letting on, though he refused to give her any answers before they uncovered more about the stone's power. Every night, she lay awake in her small, creaky bed, wondering what was coming next. She could feel the weight of the stone pressing against her chest, its strange energy humming softly beneath her skin. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore, one that made her heart race whenever she thought about what it might mean for her future. Ethan was patient with her, always explaining things in a way that made sense, even though it seemed like they were still just scratching the surface. He would sit with her by the fire, his silver-gray eyes focused intently on the stone as he tried to unlock its secrets. Sometimes, she thought she saw a flicker of something deeper in his gaze, something personal, as if he was searching for something he had lost long ago. "Do you know what it feels like to be completely alone?" Ethan had asked one evening, his voice low and soft. Sadie had paused, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected him to be so open about his own feelings. "I don't know," she had replied honestly. "I've always felt like an outsider, but never completely alone, not like you're describing." Ethan had looked at her then, his expression guarded but thoughtful. "It's a feeling that lingers, even when you're surrounded by people. The weight of responsibility, the pressure of being someone you're not. It can be suffocating." Sadie hadn't known how to respond to that. She wasn't sure she understood, but somehow, she felt a connection to him in that moment, like they shared a burden neither of them could escape. As the days passed, Sadie grew more curious about Ethan's past. There was still so much he wasn't telling her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that his own story was tangled up with hers in ways she didn't yet understand. But every time she tried to ask, he would change the subject, focusing instead on the magic of the stone and their growing bond. It wasn't until a week later, when they ventured deeper into the mountains to search for more clues about the stone's origins, that Sadie got a glimpse into Ethan's past. The forest was dense and quiet, the only sounds the crunching of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional call of a distant bird. As they walked, Ethan spoke more than usual, his words coming slowly, as if he were deciding whether or not to share what had been weighing on his heart. "My family was never easy," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "My father was a ruthless king. He didn't believe in mercy. I killed him when I was young, during the blood moon ceremony. I had no choice. He was a tyrant. But the weight of that choice has haunted me ever since." Sadie stopped in her tracks, stunned by the revelation. She had never expected him to share something so personal, so painful. "I never asked for this life," Ethan continued, his voice tight. "I never asked to become the Alpha King. But it was thrust upon me, and now I'm bound by the same rules my father lived by." Sadie felt a surge of sympathy for him, but also a strange sense of understanding. She had always felt trapped in her own world, unable to escape the expectations placed on her as an Omega. But Ethan, his burdens were far heavier than hers. "I never wanted to be a king," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I had to, because someone had to lead. Someone had to protect the pack. And now I'm stuck, just like you, trapped by destiny." Sadie could hear the pain in his voice, and for the first time, she saw the cracks in his seemingly perfect exterior. He was just like her, a person trying to survive in a world that demanded more than they were willing to give. The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy and profound. Sadie didn't know what to say. What could she say? But as they continued their journey deeper into the mountains, she felt a shift inside her. She wasn't alone anymore. Ethan might be carrying a burden of his own, but together, they might be able to uncover the truth about their connection and the power of the stone. It was a journey that would change everything. And for the first time in a long while, Sadie felt a spark of hope flicker within her. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she had always believed. The journey through the mountain trails became their shared mission. As days passed, Sadie and Ethan's connection deepened, though neither of them dared to fully acknowledge the tension between them. They worked together, studying the stone and deciphering its ancient inscriptions, though the true meaning of its power still eluded them. Sadie could feel the weight of the mystery growing heavier each day. It wasn't just the stone that was changing her world, it was Ethan. He had revealed pieces of his past, pieces of himself that made Sadie realize just how much he was struggling beneath the surface. But there was something more, something in the way they worked together that made her feel she wasn't as broken as she had always believed. It wasn't long before Sadie began noticing changes within herself. At night, when she lay in bed, she could feel an energy stirring deep inside her, like a dormant part of her soul was awakening. The stone seemed to be calling to her, drawing her closer to something she couldn't yet comprehend. It was as though it had always been a part of her, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true purpose. Ethan had been quiet during their studies, his usually calm demeanor tinged with an urgency she couldn't ignore. It was clear he was as much a part of this mystery as she was, though he wasn't yet ready to share everything with her. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ethan broke the silence. "Sadie, I don't know what's coming next," he admitted, his silver eyes reflecting the firelight. "But I can feel the pull of the stone, and I know it's tied to something bigger than either of us. This power, it's not just about you or me. It's about fate." Sadie looked up at him, her heart pounding. She had never thought of it that way. She had always assumed the stone was just an old relic, a family heirloom with no real significance. But now, with Ethan's words hanging in the air, she wondered if it was more than that, if it was the key to understanding her own destiny. "You mean this is all part of some bigger plan?" Sadie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't know all the answers, but I believe the stone has chosen you, Sadie. You're not just an Omega. You're part of something ancient, something powerful. And I think that power is meant to be awakened." Sadie felt a chill run through her, but it wasn't fear. It was the recognition of something deep inside her, something that had been dormant for far too long. She had always felt like an outsider, always believed she was destined for nothing more than rejection. But now, with the Alpha King standing beside her and the stone humming with energy, she couldn't help but wonder if she had a role to play in something much greater. The next day, they ventured deeper into the mountains, following a hidden path Ethan had discovered on one of his previous trips. The journey was difficult, the terrain steep and unforgiving, but neither of them complained. There was a sense of purpose in the air, a feeling that they were heading towards something that would change everything. As they reached the top of a particularly steep ridge, Sadie spotted something unusual, a large stone circle, ancient and worn, partially hidden by overgrown vines. Ethan stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening with recognition. "This is it," he said softly. "This is the place." Sadie looked around, confused. "The place for what?" she asked. Ethan turned to her, his face serious. "The stone's power, it will be unlocked here. This is where everything comes together." Sadie felt a rush of excitement and fear. She had no idea what would happen next, but she could sense the energy in the air, the crackling of something powerful just beneath the surface. She reached for the stone in her pocket, feeling its warmth against her skin. As she held it, the stone pulsed, and for a brief moment, Sadie felt a strange connection between herself, the stone, and Ethan. The air around them seemed to hum with an ancient energy, as though the land itself was awakening. "Sadie, are you ready?" Ethan asked, his voice low but filled with determination. Sadie nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was ready at all. But one thing was certain. She had no choice but to face whatever was coming next. Together, they stepped into the circle, and as they did, the stone in Sadie's hand began to glow with an intense light. The ground beneath them rumbled, and the air seemed to shimmer with power. Sadie closed her eyes, her heart racing as the energy around them intensified. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. And in that moment, she knew her life was about to change forever. The light from the stone intensified, filling the entire clearing with a radiant glow that seemed to stretch into the very air around them. Sadie's heart raced in her chest, her hand trembling as she gripped the stone tightly. Ethan stood beside her, his gaze locked on the stone, his eyes wide with realization. "It's happening," he whispered, more to himself than to Sadie. The ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, the earth alive with energy, as if something ancient was awakening. Sadie felt it, too, a pulse of power deep within her, something that resonated with her soul, a connection that she couldn't fully explain. The wind around them began to swirl, picking up speed, as though it were reacting to the energy coursing through the stone. The air was thick with an electric charge, and Sadie could feel the weight of it in her bones. She looked up at Ethan, his features illuminated by the stone's light. He was standing taller now, his usual calm replaced by an intensity she had never seen before. His eyes were focused, determined, as if he was seeing something only he could understand. "Sadie," he said, his voice steady but filled with an urgency that sent a shiver down her spine. "You need to trust me. This is what we've been waiting for. The stone, it's choosing you. It's awakening your power." Sadie's breath caught in her throat. "My power?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand, guiding it toward the stone. As her fingers brushed against its glowing surface, a rush of energy surged through her. It was like nothing she had ever felt before, a heat, a force rushing through her veins, filling her with a sense of purpose and strength. For a moment, everything around her seemed to fade away. There was only the stone, and the power it was awakening within her. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the sensations flooding her body. The world around her felt distant, and yet, somehow, she felt more connected to it than ever before. As if she were a part of the earth itself, rooted in the very fabric of the world. The power continued to surge within her, and she felt a deep connection to Ethan, as though the two of them were intertwined, bound by something greater than fate. "Sadie," Ethan's voice broke through the fog of her thoughts, his tone gentle but filled with awe. "You are the key. The stone has chosen you. You are the one who will unlock the power of this land. But you have to be ready." She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the belief that she was meant for something greater. But at the same time, there was a flicker of concern, as though he knew the weight of the responsibility she was about to take on. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I've spent my whole life feeling like I was nothing, like I didn't belong. How can I be the one to do this?" Ethan's grip on her hand tightened, his touch reassuring. "You've always been more than you think, Sadie. You've just had to discover it. The stone didn't choose you because you were perfect. It chose you because you have the strength to carry its power. And I'll be with you every step of the way." Sadie felt a swell of emotion in her chest. Ethan's words were more than just comforting. They were a promise. A promise that no matter what came next, she wouldn't have to face it alone. She nodded slowly, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of the unknown. She felt ready. The glow from the stone slowly began to fade, its light dimming as the energy within her settled, but the power remained. It was now a part of her, something she could feel deep within her bones. She looked up at Ethan, her heart filled with gratitude and determination. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. "I don't know what's coming, but I'll face it. With you." Ethan smiled at her, a look of pride and admiration in his eyes. "Together," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of their shared journey ahead. As the last of the light from the stone flickered out, the world around them seemed to settle, as if the earth itself was taking a deep breath. The power was no longer overwhelming. It was now a part of Sadie, a part of who she was meant to be. And with that, they turned to face the next chapter of their journey, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The next few days felt like a blur for Sadie. With the stone's power now awakened within her, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had led up to this moment. The air around her seemed to hum with the energy that had once seemed so foreign to her. It was as if the earth itself was alive beneath her feet, and the world was now at her fingertips. Ethan, though quiet at times, remained by her side, watching her carefully as she adjusted to the new powers within her. He was there to guide her, but Sadie couldn't help but feel that there was more to him than he let on. They spent their days training, Ethan teaching her to harness the energy of the stone, helping her focus the power within her. Every time she connected with the stone, a rush of warmth would flood her, and the feeling of something greater than herself would surround her. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. As the days passed, Sadie began to notice something else. There was a shift in the way Ethan looked at her, as though he were seeing her in a new light. She didn't know if it was the power of the stone or something else entirely, but their moments together seemed to carry a weight they hadn't before. Sadie pushed the thoughts aside. Now wasn't the time for distractions. She had a duty to fulfill, a path she was beginning to understand more each day. One evening, after their usual training session, they sat by the fire, both silent for a moment, watching the flames dance. The crackling of the fire was the only sound breaking the stillness of the night. It was Ethan who spoke first, his voice soft but serious. "Sadie," he began, his tone more thoughtful than usual, "you've come a long way in a short amount of time. But there's something we still need to do. We can't delay it any longer." Sadie turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze, his silver-gray eyes filled with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "The stone isn't the only thing tied to your family's past," he explained. "There are others, forces beyond our understanding, that are aware of the power you've unlocked. We need to find the source of that power before it falls into the wrong hands." Sadie's pulse quickened at his words. "What kind of forces are we talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, his expression hardening. "There are those who would do anything to control the stone's power, to use it for their own gain," he said. "We have to be prepared for what's coming, and we have to find out who's behind it." Sadie felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that there would be challenges ahead, but she hadn't anticipated something like this. The weight of their task seemed heavier now, and the fear she had pushed down for so long began to creep back into her thoughts. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I've always been told I was weak, that I couldn't handle anything this big." Ethan's gaze softened, and he reached across the space between them, gently placing his hand on hers. "You're stronger than you think, Sadie," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "The stone chose you for a reason, and together, we'll face whatever comes our way." His words comforted her, but the weight of their mission was still there, pressing against her chest. Sadie squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. She didn't know what they were up against, but she knew she couldn't do this alone. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Together." Ethan smiled at her, his expression filled with pride. "Together," he repeated. The fire crackled as the night stretched on, the world outside their small cabin silent and still. But inside, Sadie felt a shift, a newfound determination. She might not have all the answers, and she might not fully understand the power coursing through her. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let fear stop her now. She had a purpose, a mission, and with Ethan by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The days that followed were a mix of tension and anticipation. Sadie and Ethan had spent countless hours studying the stone, but it became clear that there was still so much they didn't understand. The stone's power was unlike anything Sadie had ever encountered, and every time she tried to focus on it, she felt an overwhelming surge of energy that left her dizzy and unsure. Ethan, always patient, guided her through each moment, teaching her how to control the power within her. Yet, even with his guidance, Sadie couldn't shake the feeling that there was more at play than she realized. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the wind howling outside, Ethan broke the silence. "Sadie," he began, his voice steady but tinged with something unreadable. "I think it's time we go to the source." She looked at him, confused. "The source?" she repeated, trying to make sense of his words. Ethan nodded, his silver-gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "The power of the stone isn't just tied to your bloodline. It's linked to a place, an ancient place where this power was first awakened. We need to go there." Sadie's heart raced at the mention of a place. She had always known the stone was special, but the idea that it was tied to something beyond her own family was unsettling. "Where is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan paused, his gaze distant as though he were recalling something from long ago. "It's deep in the mountains, hidden away from prying eyes. Only those who are meant to find it can." Sadie swallowed, her throat dry. The idea of venturing into unknown territory was both thrilling and terrifying. "And you think we'll find answers there?" she asked, searching his face for any sign of certainty. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I believe it's the key to understanding everything. The stone, your power, and the connection between us. We have no other choice but to go." Sadie nodded, feeling a mix of fear and resolve wash over her. She had no idea what they were about to face, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't do this without him. The journey was long and exhausting, with the terrain growing steeper as they climbed higher into the mountains. They walked in silence, the only sounds the crunching of leaves underfoot and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. The air was thin up here, and Sadie found herself struggling to keep pace, her breath coming in shallow gasps. But Ethan was beside her, his presence a steady force that kept her going. She could feel his concern, though he never said anything about it. They continued to climb, the mountain path winding higher and higher, until they reached a cliffside where the landscape changed dramatically. The trees gave way to a wide, open expanse of rocky terrain, and in the distance, Sadie could see a faint glow on the horizon. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice thick with awe. Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We're almost there," he said. As they made their way toward the glow, the ground beneath them began to shake ever so slightly, a tremor that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. Sadie looked at Ethan, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is that?" she asked, her voice full of anxiety. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped, his eyes scanning the horizon. "It's the power," he said, his voice low. "It's awakening. This is the place where everything started." Sadie's heart skipped a beat as she realized what he was saying. This was the moment. Everything was about to change. They quickened their pace, the excitement building with each step, until they finally reached the edge of a vast, ancient stone circle. The stones were towering, weathered by time, but still standing strong. In the center of the circle, the faint glow they had seen from a distance intensified, and Sadie could feel the energy in the air, swirling around them like a living thing. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes locked on the center of the circle. "This is it," he said softly. "This is where your destiny lies." Sadie took a deep breath and followed him, the weight of the moment settling heavily on her shoulders. The stone beneath her feet seemed to hum with the same energy that had been coursing through her since the day she found the stone. She could feel it now, clearer than ever before, the connection, the power. As she stepped into the circle, the world around her seemed to blur, the air thick with anticipation. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and the stone in her hand began to glow with an intensity that took her breath away. "Sadie?" Ethan's voice cut through the haze, urgent and filled with warning. "You have to focus. This is where it all begins." Sadie closed her eyes, her fingers tightening around the stone. She felt the power surge within her, overwhelming and raw. The world around her seemed to spin, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she was still standing on solid ground. But then, a voice, low, ancient, and commanding, filled her mind, and she knew that everything had changed. The voice spoke in a language she didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. "You are the one," the voice said. "The time has come." The voice echoed in Sadie's mind, low and ancient, resonating with the very essence of the stone in her hand. "You are the one." The voice intoned, its presence overwhelming, filling the space around her as though the earth itself had spoken. Sadie's heart raced as the weight of the words settled in. She had always felt as if she were meant for something more, something larger than her life as a discarded omega. But hearing these words, so full of power and authority, made her question everything. "The time has come," the voice continued, and Sadie felt a shiver run through her spine. The world around her began to blur, the edges of reality warping as the energy from the stone coursed through her, growing stronger by the second. She could feel the power stirring inside her, ready to burst free, yet she struggled to control it. Ethan's voice reached her, cutting through the swirling chaos around them. "Sadie, focus. You have to control it. Let the power flow through you, not overwhelm you." His words grounded her, pulling her back from the brink. She could hear the urgency in his voice, but there was something else, something softer, an unspoken reassurance that, no matter what, they were in this together. Taking a deep breath, Sadie closed her eyes and focused on the stone in her hand. The glow intensified, but this time, instead of fear, she felt a calmness spread through her. The power was there, yes, but it was no longer something to be afraid of. It was a part of her, something she had carried all along, just waiting to be awakened. Slowly, carefully, she allowed the energy to flow through her, letting it fill her being. She could feel the ancient force coursing through her veins, stronger than anything she had ever felt before, yet it was not overpowering. It was as though she had unlocked something deep inside herself, a hidden well of strength that had always been there, waiting. The voice spoke again, this time not in her mind, but in the air. Around them, vibrating with power. "You are ready. The bond is formed." Sadie opened her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the stone glow with a brilliant light, as if it were alive, breathing with her. She felt a connection to it. No, a connection to everything. The earth beneath her feet, the wind that howled around them, the stars above. All of it was tied together in a way she had never understood before. And then she felt it. Ethan's presence beside her, steady and unwavering. It was not just the power of the stone, not just the force inside her, but the bond they shared. She had felt it before, but now it was undeniable. She could sense him, his thoughts, his emotions, as if they were one. This was the power of the stone. This was the key to everything. Sadie turned to Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand now," she said, her words filled with awe. This is what I'm meant to do. This is my purpose." Ethan looked at her, his expression filled with pride and relief. "Yes, Sadie, you are the one. You always have been." The connection between them deepened, and for a moment, it was as if the world stood still. They were no longer two individuals, struggling to find their place. They were united, bound by fate and power. Sadie knew then that no matter what came next, they would face it together. As the light from the stone slowly faded, the world around them began to return to normal. The air settled, the wind died down, and the earth no longer rumbled beneath their feet. But Sadie could still feel the power within her, still feel the connection to the stone, to the land, and to Ethan. "We're ready," Ethan said quietly, his voice full of certainty. Sadie nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We are." Together, They turned and walked away from the stone circle, leaving behind the ancient power that had brought them together. But as they moved forward, Sadie knew that this was just the beginning. The world was full of challenges, full of forces beyond their control, but they would face them together, united by the power they had unlocked and the bond they had forged. Whatever came next, Sadie was ready. And with Ethan by her side, she knew they could overcome anything.